Why are you striving these days? Why are you trying to earn grace? Why are you crying? Let me lift up your face. Just don't turn away. Why are you looking for love? Why are you still searching as if I'm not enough? So where will you go, child? Tell me, where will you run? So where will you run? 'Cause I'll be by your side wherever you fall in the dead of night. Whenever you call, and please don't fight. These hands that are holding you, my hands are holding you. Look at these hands and my side. They swallowed the grave on that night when I drank the world's sin, so I could carry you in and give you life. I wanna give you life, and I'll be by your side wherever you fall in the dead of night. Whenever you call, and please don't fight. These hands that are holding you, my hands are holding you at my side. Wherever you fall in the dead of night. Whenever you call, and please don't fight. These hands that are holding you, my hands are holding you. Hands that are holding you, my hands are holding you at my side. Wherever you fall in the dead of night. Whenever you call, and please don't fight. These hands that are holding you, my hands are holding you. Here at my side, my hands are holding you. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to New England Chapel. We're currently coming toward the end of our current series called I Have My Doubts. And today Mike's going to be delving into how faith can actually, at times, make us outcasts among family and friends. But, living a fulfilling life full of love can kind of draw us back into a loving community. And I remember this time in high school. I switched from a small Christian school to a public school because I played flag football one time and did really well, so I decided I wanted to play normal football at the public school. So I switched, and I think I was known as, the Christian schooler when I made that change. So it was a little tough, but when I eventually made friends, there was this moment where I was hanging out with a group, and we got into a conversation about faith. And it got a little heated, and I remember at one point I raised my voice, and I was almost yelling at this guy, like, why don't you just believe, And it was so silly looking back on it. He stopped and was like, why are you yelling at me? And I found, now that I've grown older, I've learned that, the people in my life who have really strong faith and who have a massive effect on people, they typically don't have a lot to say about it. They typically just live these really fulfilling, loving lives. and they kind of quietly draw people into faith. And so, I don't know if those friends from high school just remember me as the guy who was yelling about his faith. I hope not. But I think living a loving life, that's what sticks with people. So let's stand for our next song. You can greet those around you. And please join us in singing How Deep the Father's Love.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He would give His only Son to make a wretch His treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my guilt upon His shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything, no gifts, no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart, His wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart, His wounds have paid my ransom.
Have a seat. Something. So apparently we had a really great women's retreat this weekend. I heard good things. More importantly, there's leftover food. So it wasn't. I didn't get here early enough to make it available to you before the service. But right after service, there'll be a table out there, and we've got eggs and we've got sausage and bacon and all kinds of French toast. Amazing stuff. You'll want it. So that'll be after service. I'm doing announcements, am I not? I'm doing announcements. All right, so number one, you understand why we do announcements, right? So most of what happens on a Sunday morning is meant for your, is meant for your consumption. It's meant for you to use and think about, right? But when we do announcements, those are things that you can actually be involved in, things that you can go to. So you can start to make friends at the church, get to know people, start to grow together with other people. Most of the announcements that we do, however, are things that we do with other people in the church. But this one is one of those rare announcements where we are actually doing something with the wider community. So the Fall Foliage Hike, I am a new member of the Franklin Bellingham Rail Trail Committee, and thank you, and that doesn't probably matter to you much, except for I'm the one organizing it. So this is a great opportunity for us to get to know people in the community in Franklin and Bellingham, and people who like to walk and, I don't know, run or something crazy like that. There's, like, you can bike if you want to. So that is this coming Saturday at 11 a.m. So please join me. And so you know we're not going to be hiking very, very fast. No, you can go at your own speed. That's fine. All right, number 2, interestingly, is called The Journey. Now, what's a hiking theme or something? It's The Journey. The Journey is our first best way of helping you understand who God is and who you are in God. It's our way of sort of introducing what the church is and why we do what we do. You can ask hard questions, and we'll do our best to answer any of those questions. But this week is the best possible week to join the journey because our own Laura Laird is going to be leading it. And of all the Lairds, she might be my favorite. Don't tell Mike. So that's exciting. So normally it would start today, the second Sunday of every month, but we're actually pushing this back till next Sunday. So don't worry, you don't have to come this week. Come next week. Laura, are you in the room? Oh, she's in Kids Zone. All right, so I was going to have her stand up, and she would hate me for that. Missed opportunities. So please do that. So that's the journey. And then the third thing is worship night is this Wednesday night. This is a great, for a lot of people at NEC, this is one of their very favorite things to do. It's stuff like this awesome music, but that's the whole thing. That's like the whole thing. So it's a great time. And we partner with the Prayer Blanket Ministry, which is a caregiving ministry, and this is our opportunity to show love and care for in this case, somebody who has struggled and somebody that we want to take care of. So you have so many good opportunities. I'm excited for you. I'm going to go. I'm going to get your breakfast ready. How about that? All right. See you guys.
Sometimes I pray before I slap in the face, then beg to be spared, 'cause I'm a coward. If there's a master of death, I bet he's holding his breath as I show the blind and tell the deaf about his power. I'm a doubting Thomas. Can't keep my promises, 'cause I don't know what to say. Only a little faith. Can I be used to help others find truth when I'm scared? Find proof that it's a lie. Can I be led down a trail, dropping breadcrumbs that prove I'm not ready to die? Please give me time to decipher the signs. Please forgive me the time that I've wasted. 'Cause 'cause I'm a doubting Thomas. I'll take your promise, though I know nothing's safe. Only a little faith.
Morning, everyone. I know you've been welcomed probably a couple times, but I'm going to welcome you, and it's good to see you all. If this is your first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Mike. I'm one of the pastors. And let me also say, if this is your first time, please come back next week also, because this is going to be a different service. And so far, everything seems the same, but if you notice, we've got 3 chairs coming out here, because my opening illustration for the message is a quick panel interview. And so that's one thing that's different. The other thing that's different is that normally we try to hit the whole spectrum of faith practicing. That's probably not the right word. I can't think of the whole faith spectrum, where you could come to New England Chapel and benefit from it no matter where you're at. You could be pretty sure that God doesn't exist, and you're only here because someone who's giving you a ride to soccer practice had to come here. Or you could be someone who has embraced faith for decades and are enjoying your faith life. And we try to hit everybody on that spectrum every Sunday. This Sunday, we're actually narrowing the scope down a bit, and we're speaking primarily to people who have embraced faith. But if you aren't there yet, I think you'll enjoy the eavesdropping, because the topic is one that may be a no-brainer or you may be convinced of. And so we've been in this series on doubt, really looking at things that keep you from embracing faith. And today's topic is the thing that's keeping me from embracing faith is I don't want to become a social outcast. And so if you are if you grew up in the church and sort of grew up in a Christian home, you'd be like, why would I be a social outcast? Well, I am a pastor, and I run in pastoral circles, and so I don't want you to take my word for it, and that's why we have invited a few youth or young adult folks to give you their perspective. I never, ever leverage family for the sake of the church, but I'm going to do it this morning because of their viewpoint. So I want to call out our panelists, and I'll introduce them as they come on out. So this is my daughter, Phoebe. Phoebe's 14 and, freshman age. And thanks, Sam. And then this is Molly. Molly is a senior at WPI, Worcester Polytech. And Sam is my oldest son. Sam is a software engineer at a robotics startup in Boston. And so we got the young adult and below, Phoebe, not quite young adult, sorry, mindset. And so what I wanted to ask them, since you could probably trust their opinion on what unchurched people think of Christians better than you can trust me, a pastor. So I asked them to, in kind but very frank words, respond to some questions. And so there's only one mic, so if you'll have to share that between you. And here's the question: in your world, what does the folks in your spheres of influence think of Christians/Christianity?
Generally, if you just ask someone, some of the people I work with, what do you think of Christianity? It's not really the best impression. I think a lot of that is because of current influential people who are publicly I'm a Christian, and a lot of the stuff that they'll say, people generally view Christianity as really condemning and judging, and trying to a lot of times control other people to follow their views whether they want to or not.
Okay.
In a lot of my spheres of influence, Christianity is viewed as relatively closed-minded because people are like, oh, this person will follow the books, and they're not really going to open their eyes and try to listen to others about, the world. So that's just my impression.
In my circles, I think people kind of see it as like this, it's just this set of rules that you have to follow, and bunch of words that don't make any sense, and yeah.
Now, let me ask one quick follow-up question. You all gave kind of negative views of Christians or Christianity. Why do you think that has come about? And you don't all have to answer that. You could, but if you have a thought on that, why do you think the world has developed a sort of or at least your worlds have developed a negative response?
I think it's because most of my, in that sphere of influence, I think most of their parents make them go, so it's just like this thing that they have to do, and it's boring and stuff,
Yeah, so they haven't owned it themselves. It's something that they're forced to do, right? Molly or Sam?
I think it's actually not a majority of Christians who cause this reputation. I would say it's actually just probably a small minority of people who are trying to tell people what to do rather than listen. And I think if you really talk to a lot of Christians, they're fine, but it's this minority that kind of sways it. Also, I think people will, if they're interested in Christianity but they don't know a lot of it, will like go ahead and look up, good things about and bad things. And if you take a lot of lines in different texts or what people say out of context, it can seem really bad.
Oh, that's a good point. If you do a Google search on it and you get overwhelmed with negativity.
Yeah,
Sam?
on like on a similar note, it's like I definitely think it's a very loud minority of people who give it like currently a bad name. But then, yeah, if you look up like stuff about Christianity and you look at like historical things, there's so many significant negative events over like positive events that were like more popularized, and that definitely doesn't help.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for the quick sermon illustration. I appreciate it. Can you guys give these guys a golf clap? So I think that was very helpful. And the reason why I wanted them up here was because I think that to be a Christian is a rough place, and it's not because the people in this room are bad people. It's because, as Molly stated, a couple of flies have landed in the punch bowl, and no one wants to punch anymore. And so, so I wanted to talk about how do you live and love and go about your business as a person of faith without being an outcast. And I think in general we have these two default ways. One way is to just completely keep your faith sealed off from the public world and try to hide it at all costs so that your friends, family members, coworkers, well, probably not friends or family, but your coworkers, your neighbors, people you interact with, don't think you're an outcast, don't raise an eyebrow. Or the other thing you could do is you could try to push it, and you'd be like, and try to let people know how you believe and why you believe it, and let people know what sin is, and that God's disappointed in this or God's disappointed in that. And I want to say that those two are really not very biblical options, but they're probably the most prevalent options. But there's a huge, wide middle road. And so if you're holding back, and this is probably a very small percentage of people in this room, but this is more for our conversation rather than their conversation. But if you're holding back from Christianity because you don't want to be looped in with these outcasts, there is a massive, massive different way. And we never talk about it as a church, and I want to talk about it today. And I want to talk about it using one of, actually, since I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater as far as conventionality, I want to talk about it using one of the most difficult parables that Jesus gives. It's not difficult in that it's hard to understand. It's a pretty simple parable. It's difficult because nobody over 2,000 years can really come to agreement on what it means. And it is a pretty wacky-dax parable, but I think it really gets at the heart of what this topic is all about. And so I'm going to try to preach it. I guarantee you won't hear any sermons on this parable. And there's, I'm going to get academically geeky for a second, and then I'll pull out of it. But I want to tell you why it's a problem. Because no one knows where it ends. So like it comes from the book of Luke, which is a sort of a biography of Jesus' life and ministry written by Luke. And when they find scrolls or manuscripts from the book of Luke, there are no chapter titles, there are no verses and chapters, and we get it all nice, and we get headings and paragraph breaks and even periods and semicolons. None of that. It's just words. So the interpreter has to make a decision where one thought ends and where a new one begins. And that's where they decide to put a period. They decide to put a hard break and start a new paragraph. And sometimes where you chop things up can affect the interpretation a little bit. And so with this parable, there are two main camps. Some people say the parable ends at verse 8. And if it ends at verse 8, and that's what I believe it ends at verse 8, then the parable really belongs with the three other parables right before it. And it makes a lot of sense to connect those. And there are the similar themes, and there's similar wordage with all those parables. If you extend the parable out to verse 13, I know this is boring, don't worry, I'll get to the good stuff. If you extend it out to 13, then it really should be connected with the moral teachings that go after the parable. And so where you cut the parable up decides which camp it's going to be in. And I think it belongs with the other parables instead of with the moral teachings. And just by splitting it up that way, that you could say that makes sense. Especially because this parable has the same themes and even some of the same words. All right, let's get out of the academic mumbo jumbo and let's get into the parable. So if the parable does end in verse 8, and this is the last time I'm going to mention that, then this is how it fits into its context, and this is how it should be interpreted. If you look at the three parables leading up before it, Jesus is doing something really incredible. He is trying to he's talking about this same thing in a way that we were just talking about with the panel discussion. And let's call up Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, give the introduction to the series of parables that Jesus gives. It goes like this. Now, the tax collectors, and if you've been around New England Chapel for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about tax collectors. And if you haven't, just know that they were people who got rich off of their own townsmen. They would charge them exorbitant tax prices so that they could become wealthy. No one liked a tax collector. No one liked a tax collector. So the tax collectors and sinners, I love that. Actually, in many English translations, the word sinner is actually in quotes. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees, who are the religious leaders, and the teachers of the law, who are the religious teachers, the law is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And so the Pharisees, the religious leaders, and the teachers of the law, the religious teachers, are muttering because Jesus is hanging out with the sinners and the tax collectors. This man welcomes sinners, and not just welcomes them, he eats with them. And kind of like today, if I invited you over to lunch at my house, that means I kind of accept you and we're on friendly terms. Same back then. And so basically they're saying, hey, look, we know all about the rules. We know all about the Old Testament Bible that we have currently, and we follow those rules. Those people over there, clearly by their behavior and their actions, do not. Jesus should be hanging out in this in circle, this sort of moral circle, but he's not. He's hanging out in the immoral circle. And so they're muttering about this. And so Jesus overhears this and decides to tell a series of parables directed right to them. He tells 3 parables to them and then turns and tells a parable to his disciples, his followers. And so I'm going to sum up the first 3 parables, and then we'll get to our crazy parable, okay? So you're tracking. Jesus is telling these parables. He loved to tell parables. Parables are just fictitious stories that convey spiritual reality, right? And so he's telling these parables because the people who are supposed to know God the most are criticizing and condemning Jesus for hanging out with immoral people. And by immoral, people that don't fit into the moral circle, the moral bookkeeping circle, the religious circle. Basically, the first 3 parables Jesus tells can be summed up this way. God goes out of his way to connect with people who are far from him. That's the parable of the lost coin, the lost sheep. God goes out of his way to connect with people who are far from him. That's the first 2 parables. The third parable is God goes out of his way to connect with people who are far from them, and no one is far away from God. No one is too far from God. If anyone is too far from God, it's religious people. That's the parable of the prodigal sons. So if you take those 3 parables, no one is too far from God. But if anyone is too far from God, it's religious people. Why would Jesus say that? Because if you've been around New England Chapel, we say all the time in different ways that religiosity is the enemy of faith. Religion is human beings' attempt to get to God. And it's wrapped around this sort of moral bookkeeping, the set of moral rules and behavior. If you do this and you do that, then you will be in good standing with God. But Jesus is always condemning religiosity because religiosity only measures outward behavior. You could be a morally perfect person on the outside. You could be squeaky clean inside. You could be resentful, jealous, angry, envious, greedy, selfish, arrogant. All those really things that are so far from the heart of God. You could be inside, but be religiously perfect. So Jesus is always saying, don't give in to religiosity. Religiosity is basically your ability. You're just measuring your ability to outwardly do good. You're not measuring your heart. You're not measuring your soul against God's heart and God's values. And so faith is different. Faith is God coming to you and saying, let me pull the best out in you. And as I pull the best out of you, guess what? Your morality will come along at its own fine pace. And so Jesus is slamming the religious leaders who are slamming him for hanging around with the immoral people. That's the first 3 parables. First 3 parables can be summed up by saying, God is not too far from anybody. But if he is too far from someone, it could be people who don't think they need God because they are morally perfect. Let's get to our crazy parable, okay? We don't have much time left. The crazy parable is, so Jesus now is turning from the Pharisees and tax people to the disciples. Here it comes. There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. That's actually an exact phrase from the previous parable, wasting possessions. That's what the prodigal son does. And the prodigal son is the one who ends up connecting with the landowner who symbolizes God. But anyways, Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account for your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. You're fired. You're dead to me. All right? So here's the parable setup. There is a rich guy, and he hears that the person in charge of his wealth has just been squandering it, just living La Vida Loca and allowing everybody to live La Vida Loca with his stuff. And so he calls the manager to account and fires him. Now, the manager says to himself, what should I do since my master's taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he says to the first, how much do you owe me? Owe my master. He said, 100 measures of oil. He said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. You only owe me 50 barrels of olive oil now. Then he said to another, how much do you owe? 100 measures of wheat. And he says to him, take your bill, write 80. So let me pause for a second here. Right now, the parable kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it may seem like a strange parable, but the storyline kind of makes sense. There's this really wealthy guy. His bookkeeper or his account manager or whatever you want to say is not paying attention. He's letting anything go. He's not enforcing the reconciliation of accounts. And so he gets fired. And in the process of being fired, he goes and settles everyone's account so that they're in good standing with the rich man. What do you think the rich man would do? If you were the rich man, what would you do? You'd be like, you're fired, and I'm suing you, and you're going to jail, right? You would be super mad. If you're already mad, and rightfully so, that someone's squandering your wealth, or letting no holds bar, people do whatever they want with your wealth, then you just fired him, and then he goes and settles all the accounts up, and so everybody's in good standing with you, you would be upset, right? This is where the parable goes sideways on us. He's not upset. The rich man, the master, commended the dishonest manager. Hey, good job in wasting my money. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense unless you start to read it in light of the other parables. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted wisely. And then he says this, and this is the point of the parable. For the sons of this world, now I'll explain what this means in a minute, the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. So in other words, well, all right, let me try to dig myself out of this parable hole for a second and make it clear. I think it's really, really clear. Remember, Jesus is telling these 4 parables because the religious leaders are very upset that Jesus is hanging around with immoral people. Immoral people who, in the moral bookkeeping world, are in the red. They don't have a leg to stand on. And so, in every parable, you can't draw a line detail for detail. This means this, this means this, this means this. But in general, it's a fictitious story that conveys spiritual truth. And so, in the previous parables, there are 2 parties in it. There are sort of people that represent God. It's the person who owns the coin. It's the person who owns the sheep in the first 2 parables. And then there's us, everyday people. We're the lost coin in the first one. We're the lost sheep in the second one. In the third one, God is the Father, and the 2 sons are us. And so in the first 3 parables, there is 2 parties. There is God, and there are people. In this parable, there are more than 2 parties. But let's figure out what the God and people are. So God is obviously the rich man. That's a no-brainer, right? He's the wealthy landowner who owns it all, right? So the rich man represents God. Who are we? We are represented by the debt accounts, the accounts who are in red. We are the people that can't get it perfectly right. And know why we can't get it perfectly right? Because we are human beings. And human beings, no matter how hard we try, can never be perfect. And We may be externally very squeaky clean on the outside, but you know what? Sometimes we get defensive. Sometimes we tell a little light white lie to get out of a conversation. Sometimes we tell a big lie because we don't want to deal with something. Sometimes we fire back and hurt someone with our words because we are defensive. And we can be angry, and we can be arrogant, and we can be self-righteous, and we can be X, Y, and Z. The one thing we can't be is perfect. So we are the people who accounts are out of whack. There's a third person in here. There's a third party in here that the other three parables don't have. It's the dishonest manager. Who's that? It's Christ. It's Jesus. Listen. Jesus is managing things for God, and people aren't following, people aren't living up. Their accounts are all a mess. And so he is going to take the fall for the fact that no one's paying what they're owed, what they owe. No accounts are being handled right. The manager, Christ, is going to take the fall for that. And in the process of taking the fall for that, in the process of being fired, dead to the rich man, the manager settles everyone's accounts. The manager says, let me put you in good standing with the master. It's a really, really unique parable, but it has a lot to bear with us. Basically, is what is saying in one way is very awesome. In one way, it says we have a right standing with the master because of what the manager has done, and it doesn't matter how well we can keep the rules or not. We're in good standing with the manager, the master, because of the manager's work. Awesome parable of grace. God says, I created you, I love you, you're forgiven. My son has picked up the tab. You are completely clean, so come to me. No matter how dirty you feel, no matter how dirty you seem in your day-to-day life, I see you as clean because my son has cleaned you. And so you were made for a connection with me. Connect with me. It's an awesome parable of grace, but it's also an awesome parable of how we're supposed to engage the world around us as people, the Bible passage says, as people of light. Jesus is hanging around with sinners and tax collectors, not enforcing do you think they're going to come to his house if he says to them, look, sinners, you're all sinners, but why don't you come over for some peanut butter and jelly, and so I can tell you how bad you are. He's not doing that. He's getting into their lives. He's caring for them. He's treating them with respect. He's loving them. He's showing a different way. And in the process, because of how he treats them, not as terrible moral rule followers, but as people made in the image and likeness of God, because of how he treats them, they're influenced towards God. Their eyes are opened in a new way. Jesus is not like the Pharisees or the religious teachers. And they begin to open up to God just out of the sheer ways that Jesus is engaging them. And the point of the parable, just like the crooked tax collector influenced those accounts, we are called to influence. And we influence by putting our moral bookkeeping away and getting involved in the work of love. It's an amazing parable when you cut it off with 8. If you want to know what happens when you go all the way to 13, buy me some coffee across the street at Starbucks. There's a third way. You don't have to shove your moral code onto anybody, that's what's going to make Reddit. That's what's going to make social media. That I have a lot of unchurched folk in my life, and they're always sending me news clips of dumb things Christians do. I have a few people in my life. Every week I get stuff on my phone. Here's another one. And I have to reply back, that's super sad, Jesus would never do that. That's super sad, Jesus would never do that. I could just cut and paste that. And the last one I got a few days ago was someone who shared a post on Reddit that was, I just went to my grandmother's funeral, and the pastor started off, while women are inferior in the Bible, this grandmother was a great person. That's not biblical. That's not biblical. You don't know Genesis 1. And so you can't go and, yeah, I get There's a way that you can live out your faith and not be an outcast, and that's by authentically following in this way of love. It's not a way of moral bookkeeping. It's of being real, it's being authentic, it's loving and caring for people in your own wiring, and then letting God do the rest. And sometimes, God will use that to influence people towards himself. And I've had the tremendous blessing just to be able to invest in people and then watch God open up in their lives. And it's so rewarding to say, wow, do you think that my friendship could have possibly opened someone up to the creator of the universe? That is very, very rewarding. You don't have to be a social outcast. All you have to do is follow Jesus' example and parable. Let me pray for us. Did I convince you that we should chop it at 8, or is it still confusing? I don't know. Email me and let me know. Heavenly Father, regardless of where this parable lines are drawn up, it's clear from this whole section of Luke that you care about everyone. And you want everybody to let you in. And we come alive when we do that. So God, convict us when we're in the moral bookkeeping business, and help us be, ironically, unjust stewards. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you, Kim. I forgot it. I was supposed to give this announcement. It took a 12-foot screen for me to remind me, but you won't believe it. We're running out of time. And so let me give it really one last plug, because we're actually trying to make this just a nice celebration. You see all the lights and the little lanterns, and we're going to move all these chairs out, put up big round tables, and what we're going to try to do is just... we used to do this all the time when we were really small. We used to always have these vision nights where we sort of celebrate what God is doing and look towards the future. We haven't done it forever, just because once you get up to several hundred people, it's really hard to pull this off. But, our 25th anniversary is coming up in the spring, and we just, truth be told, we probably won't do anything for that. And so let's have a bigger vision night, and that's a bad sell, isn't it? So all that to say is, if you sign up, it's free of charge. If you sign up for this, you won't regret it. This place is going to look awesome. We have a lot of fun stories. We have a couple cool videos. We have this one life transformation story that is fantastic, and we're just painting a picture of where we're heading in the next few years. So if you're interested in that, please sign up. We have to let the caterer know how many steak tips to buy. And by the way, the caterer has given us an amazing deal because we're a church. And so I hope there's steak tips now. But we have to let the caterer know. So please sign up if you're interested in coming. Anybody is welcome to come, and it's going to be a good night. So thank you.
All right, y'all can stand for our closing song. We typically try to pick a very singable song as the closing one. This song is a bit more performance-y than I'd like, but I really love the song. I haven't been able to sing it with Kaylee in a long time. So if you know the song, feel free to sing along, clap along, participate in whatever way you feel comfortable so that we're not up here performing.
Oh, the desert dreams of a river that will run down to the sea, like my heart longs for an ocean to wash down all over me. Oh, won't you take me from this valley to that mountain high above? Oh, I will pray, pray, pray till I see your smiling face. I will pray, pray, pray to one I love.
Oh, the outcast dreams of acceptance, and just to find your love's embrace, like an orphan longs for his mother. May you hold me in your grace.
Oh, won't you take me from this valley to that mountain high above? Oh, I will pray, pray, pray till I see your smiling face. I will pray,
Pray, pray.
to one I love.
Oh, 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 oh. Oh,
Oh, the caged bird dreams of a strong wind that will flow beneath her wings, like a voice lost for a melody.
oh, Jesus, carry me.
Won't you take me from this valley to that mountain high above? Oh, I will pray, pray, pray till I see your smiling face. I will pray,
Pray, pray.
to one I love. Oh, I will pray, pray, pray till I see your smiling face. I will pray, pray, pray to the one I love.
All right, before I give our final blessing, I just want to give one more shout out for worship night. I got to sit in and listen to worship night rehearsal on Wednesday, and it was one of the first times I've ever just been able to sit and listen, because I'm usually on stage, and it sounded amazing. So I highly encourage you all to go on Wednesday if you've never been. 7 o'clock Wednesday night, worship night. You all should go. All right, so go with this blessing from Micah 6:8. But he's already made it plain how to live, what to do. what God is looking for in men and women. It's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. Have a great week, everyone.